Today, we're honored to welcome Tom Fitz, a 6-time Emmy Award-winning cinematographer and producer whose breathtaking work has transported audiences into the hidden world beneath the waves. From capturing the delicate movements of a variety of marine life to documenting the changing oceans in the face of climate change, Tom blends artistry and science in a way that inspires both wonder and urgency. Tom has worked on some of the most visually stunning nature documentaries, and his films don't just entertain. They educate, spark curiosity, and remind us of our responsibility to protect the ocean. He has forwarded this work through the creation of Schoolyard Films, in which he creates free films for K-12 students to teach them about the natural world and to make marine and climate research accessible. For students who dream of telling stories through film, Tom offers a remarkable example of how creative passion can become a powerful tool for impact. We're fortunate to have Tom visiting Fairfield to deliver the Center for Climate, Coastal, and Marine Studies Distinguished Seminar, as well as to welcome incoming first-year students in the John Charles Meditz College of Arts and Sciences as a part of their orientation programming. So let's dive in, literally and figuratively, into a conversation about craft, career, and climate with our distinguished guest, Tom Fitz. Welcome to The Coastal Call, a podcast by the Fairfield University Center for Climate, Coastal, and Marine Studies. Today's podcast is generously funded by the Achilles and Bodman Foundation. I'm your host, Rob Nazarian, founding director of the center. Also in the studio today is Dr. Brian Ripley Crandall, director of the Connecticut Writing Project and professor of English education at Fairfield University, who serves on the center's planning committee and advisory council, and who also produces The Right Time, an international video podcast uniting teachers and writers through his National Writing Project work. Welcome, Tom. We're so fortunate to have you joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
To get started, I want to talk about your path to cinematography. What first drew you to cinematography and specifically to this fantastic and exciting area of underwater filmmaking?
When I was in college, I thought that I wanted to be a marine biologist, and so was taking classes for that route. And I was volunteering at the same time in an aquarium, an oceanarium, and we worked on a language study with 2 captive bottlenose dolphins. And I loved the science. I loved what we were doing. And then for me, the game changer happened one day. A film crew came in to make a short story about our work. And in the middle of the day, lunchtime, I sat down with a sandwich on the side of the tank with their cameraman. And in that conversation, all of the light bulbs started flashing in my mind that this is my path. This is what I want to do. And it was a change for me to not be the scientist, but I figured that being a filmmaker could let me work with scientists and work in the wild. I was getting a bit saddened by captivity for the animals that we were working with there and then. And so out of that one conversation, my career started unfolding, well, first in my mind, my imagination, and then, figuring out how to make it reality.
One of the things that's wonderful about the Center for Climate, Coastal, and Marine Studies at Fairfield University is it's an interdisciplinary project. And so we have representation from all the schools across our campus. And one of the things that I feel unites us is the narrative, the stories that inspire us. And so I'm curious, was there a particular film, a book, or a direct experience from your youth that inspired your path?
Well, I remember as a kid, I lived in Bermuda. My dad landed work there when I was 12, and we left New York and moved there. And it was there that I really, truly fell in love with the ocean, learned how to free dive and then scuba dive. And at that time, this was in the early 70s, a film called Blue Water, White Death came out. And I remember seeing that in a big screen in Bermuda and just being so blown away by a documentary on great white sharks, and nobody had ever done anything like what they did with that. And that was my first experience at documentary filmmaking with wildlife in the water, and I was really impressed by that.
That's amazing.
And that fits so nicely in the Jesuit model of discernment. Certainly, we practice that at Fairfield. So, as you discerned that path forward and went into underwater filming, what are some of the unique challenges that presented themselves? How does underwater filming compare to shooting on land?
The first thing really is that you need a comfort level. You need to be so comfortable in the water that you don't have to think about that aspect of it, so you can concentrate on the animals and on the camera work and the filmmaking part. So that's a background that's just mandatory, I think, to bring to the table at the very start. And then my path, at least, has been working on a lot of different marine mammal stories. And so with those animals, oftentimes you'll do those free diving. And so the free diving comfort also needs to be a part of what you can bring to it. And then, working underwater, you really are required for the most part to be wide angle and close to your subject, even if you're in clear water, even if it looks like beautiful Caribbean, Bahamian, crystal clear water, there still is a little bit of stuff in there always. You can't sit back and use a long lens and zoom in on, let's say it's a shark that you might think might want to, bite you, so you want to stay away from it. It doesn't work that way. You have to figure out the safety and the comfort of being up close pretty much with all of the wildlife that we're filming underwater. So there's that aspect of, and that's where scientists come in to help us, because I have to say, as a cameraman, you can't expect me to know all the details of everything, for every single assignment. And so we absolutely depend on the knowledge from the local folks, the scientists who we're working with, to help us get the images that the film needs.
As we were walking into the studio today, I shared a story about the mechanical pencil, as Dr. Nazarian handed us one to take notes for this interview, and how young people this summer managed to do interesting things with a mechanical pencil that I didn't know was possible. And I had to act on my feet of how am I going to counter this impromptu moment. And it made me think about, I have not shot film underwater. I don't even think I've scuba dived in my life. What is it like being underwater around marine life when something goes wrong? Have you had any challenges while you were shooting your films?
Well, it's a great question. So, we have a safety team who works in advance of an assignment even coming to my desk, and they do a great job. Then I need to sign off on the safety before we then go to the field and do the work. And we always do our best to have things unfold properly. Once in a blue moon, we make mistakes. And so I'll give you an example of one of my biggest mistakes that was pretty frightening. I've done a lot of whale work, and we were working for Tokyo Broadcasting on a film about southern right whales. So we were in Patagonia. And they gave us 2 weeks, just myself and my partner, to get the underwater footage in advance before their main crew from Tokyo came with the host of the program and everybody else, the whole sort of entourage. So we had 2 weeks to get, lovely underwater footage. And the whales in our 2 weeks were just accommodating and friendly and seemingly curious, and all was going so well that we got too relaxed. And on our last day of those 2 weeks before the rest of the crew came in, we saw 3 whales sort of, a bit off the boat. And here was our big mistake. We didn't stop to look at their behavior and assess what they were doing and, have the discussion, is it okay for us to get in the water? We just said, we're going for it. And that was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 was, in those days, I had quite a large camera that weighed in the housing about 70 pounds. And so it was a big rig, and I was still fiddling with it. And my partner was ready, and I just said, sort of nonchalantly, well, hop in, I'll be in a minute. That's also a mistake. Diving should be done absolutely as a team for safety. So that was mistake number 2. Glenn goes in the water, and what I don't see as I'm messing with my gear is a whale swims up to him. The other two left immediately. The one whale that clearly was not happy with what had just happened turned, and it threw its flukes, its tail, at my buddy Glenn, and he was fortunately able to kind of rear back, and it just glanced his wetsuit hood, which is, thick rubber on his forehead, on his head. So he was fine, but had he been an inch closer, he could have been knocked out. Whales are mighty powerful. But I didn't see this, and so I then get myself in the water, and the water was kind of green. I took a guess where the whale was. I actually hit record on just green water, and then this part was perfect. Emerging out of the greenness, a whale starts coming into my frame, nicely framed, and closer and closer and closer and closer. And finally, it's apparent that it's just going to keep on coming, and we're going to bump into each other. And the camera housing had a plastic sunshade on it that had kind of sharpish edges, corners. And whale skin is just as sensitive as human skin. I didn't want to bump it with that. So I aborted the shot, put the camera down on my right side, and now I'm just a few feet from, a 40-foot animal. I don't know if that weighs 40 tons or so, but I can't remember exactly, but it's a lot. And we're side by side, and then it rears back with its whole head, upper body, almost like a golfer in a backswing, and then just clobbered me. I've never been hit so hard in my life. Scared the heck out of me. And I was shallow. I get to the surface quickly, and my hand is up, waving for the boat in a way that they know, this is unusual. Come over quickly. I see Glenn. He's waving. We come together. The whale starts turning around to come back for us, and we both thought, we compared notes, obviously, right afterwards. We both thought that, this could be it. The boat comes in quick enough that the whale got distracted. It came up in a semi-breach with the whole third, sort of the front third of its body, and got above the two people in the boat, crashed down so hard that it cracked the hull of the boat. And we both thought, well, it's going to kill them, and then it's going to come back for the easy pickings with us. And then it left.
Wow.
And we got out of the water absolutely shaking with fear and adrenaline and all that stuff. But upon reflection, we had made a couple of big mistakes. And fortunately, in decades of camera work, those experiences are very, very, very few. And again, I go back to, we have a safety team that figures things out in advance, and then we do. And you have to stick to the rules. When you bend the rules, then there's room for goofs.
We're so happy to hear that you and your team are safe. That was such a close call. That leads me to the next question on the role of technology. With the advent of newer technology, such as drones, remote-operated cameras, even AI, how are they pushing underwater cinematography forward and making it safer for you and your team?
Well, it's huge, and over the years, it's always important to try to keep up, not with all technology, but try to keep up. And without a doubt, drones have really changed things for us. We may not be filming that often with them, but we can send them up to scout for us. And if you're at boat level, you might not know what's going on a quarter or half a mile away, and so drones are great for that. The camera technology is getting better and better, and of course, as a cameraman, I need to keep up with that. But I think one of the really interesting pieces of equipment that has made a huge difference to underwater filmmakers are rebreathers, which have been around a long time, but rebreathers allow the diver to operate pretty much without any bubbles coming out. You are literally breathing your same breath over and over and over again, and behind you there's a chemical reaction, and the CO2 is removed from your breath so you can take it in again, and then you have two small bottles on your back, and one is pure oxygen because we are consuming oxygen, obviously, always. And so you've got to replenish that, but it's pretty much a closed system. And so it means, with animals, there are plenty of animals. We're big, and they can be completely intimidated and shy, especially if we're making all the noise with scuba bubbles. And so you're not going to have much success filming them if they're going to be fleeing. And so rebreather technology has really made a big difference for us.
I'm thinking as a person who spends his time with his fingers typing on a computer or writing in a notebook about storytelling, and you have just told us a few stories that have me mesmerized. And I'm interested in your way of knowing with visual storytelling. How is it when you're filming underwater? Do you go in with an idea of an arc of what you're trying to capture, or do you capture material and then work and edit the shots you get to tell a larger story? What does that look like in your profession?
It's a great question. And really, I think that we do both. We enter every shoot with, maybe it's with a storyboard. If not, it's with a pretty detailed wish list that the story needs. I mean, just in terms of filmmaking, you can't just go in and get one lovely long shot and that really lovely long shot's going to go in. It just doesn't usually work that way. And so if the average shot lasts for about 6 seconds, that means you're breaking things down in a way that the editor can use them, because the storytelling really happens, the way I look at it, it happens in the edit room. We do our best to deliver the important visuals, but then in post, they can almost tell any story that they would like with that footage, and with the pacing and with the story arc and with all of those things that come into play. But my job in the field as a cameraman is to give them the most options. And so if you see a scene, we'll get that lovely wide shot. Of course, you've got to do that. But then you've got to change focal lengths, and you've got to get your medium shots, your tight shots. If you can get the ultra, the big close-ups, you do that. If you then come back, re-kit, and have a macro lens on, or whatever it takes to give the biggest variety of images that then let them tell the most robust story in post. So that's how I see my job, is delivering that. And ideally, if you have just a shoot that's a day or two, you're going to be working at a feverish pace and you deliver what you can do. But ideally with wildlife, you're going to have weeks on site, because you never really know what the animals are going to give you. You never really know what they're going to be doing in advance. You can guess, but it doesn't always work out. And sometimes you get things that you hadn't thought of. And so you want to chip away at everything that they are offering and then give that bag of footage to the folks in the edit suite to then tell the story. So oddly enough, in wildlife filmmaking, the script is about the last thing written.
That's really interesting and honestly a bit counter to what I had imagined. In your last few stories and comments, it's become so clear how expensive underwater and wildlife filmmaking is, both in terms of materials, but also in terms of time. So if you were talking to an undergraduate listener, how would you encourage them to get started with underwater or wildlife filmmaking, given how expensive it is, both monetarily and in terms of time, to get started?
It's a great question. Anything to do with diving starts the expenses just going up. If you can afford a really expensive camera, well, more power to you, but most people can't, certainly at the start. And my answer to that is you can learn your chops with any camera, just about. Ideally, it'll be one that can take a few different lenses to give you different focal lengths. But you really can start practicing and with your storytelling with whatever inexpensive cameras are handy. And so I think it's practice, practice, practice. And if you then show somebody who has the capability of commissioning a film for you, you can say, look, this is what I've done on a very small budget. If you give me a bigger budget with bigger equipment, you now have an idea of what our skill level is. You can show people that with inexpensive cameras. And so I think the most important thing for new filmmakers from the camera perspective is to get in there and shoot, and start learning and seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. You're going to come back often and say, why in the world did I ever do that? Terrible idea. But you'll start honing your skills. And so that part of it, I don't think has to be expensive. And you can find, on our laptops today, there are basic editing programs that are really sophisticated. And so I am a believer that if you can just afford the dive gear and, that part of it, then the underwater camera work doesn't have to be exorbitant.
The large body of your work and your projects showcases the beauty, but also the fragility of underwater life in the ocean. This is a big picture question. What do you hope individuals who see your films get out of them? What is the larger mission you feel for what you're doing or what you have done?
Well, I'm proud of what I've done for a lot of decades on a lot of programs that I think are really pretty, decent quality. But I do think that we have made a mistake by only capturing the beauty of nature. I do love the behavior-driven films. That's sort of my passion. And so I am really proud of that. But where we have been lacking, which is becoming more and more apparent, is in the conservation side of what we're doing. And there's been a fear amongst television commissioners that audiences will get turned off if you bring up, a strong conservationist story. They've always thought that people are attracted to these, how beautiful nature is. And so it's been hard to get those films commissioned, but I believe that is changing, and that has been my change in career. I've pulled way back on my television work now, and I've really amped up the educational work. And so we're doing our best now to tackle stories that are both important. Some of them are depressing, things like ocean plastic. If you really look into it, it's a really depressing topic, but we're trying to pick things that we can also offer solutions for, because I do believe that, there's the ebb and flow, the story arc. We have to offer hope and ways forward. Otherwise, I think people will stop watching our programs. But also, we want to provide those ways forward and answers. And so those are the programs that we are greenlighting now to make.
That's exciting that you're now getting to do these conservation films. And it certainly fits within the mission of Schoolyard Films, which we mentioned at the top of our podcast to the audience. Could you talk a bit about the work that you're doing with Schoolyard, in particular some of the projects you're commissioning, and how, as a filmmaker, you're taking such a large portfolio of conservation research and presenting it to a K-12 audience?
Well, the main thrust of our films is all about the importance of stewardship. It's all about taking care of the environment. And so, any direction you look, there's an environmental story that you can tell. So the stories are all very different, but there's that underlying theme that we have going. And with my interests as a marine person, we're probably a bit more top heavy with marine stories, but we've now tackled sort of an initiative that I think is opening up some new doors for us in terms of our reach and also the scope and breadth of what we can offer. And we've done that by starting a mentorship program. And so rather than Schoolyard Films making 1 or 2 films a year, which we've been doing, I'm proud of, it's all great, we are opening it up internationally to emerging filmmakers so that we give them a grant to make a film that's kind of in their backyard, that they've grown up with. Typically, they're passionate about it. They know the story inside and out. Their budgets are lean, but because they don't typically have any air travel costs and hotel costs. The lean budget can work for them. And it means that we're now, and we insist in their applications to us that they give us the whole treatment, the story that they want to tell, but that they also address, if the film does get made, what do they see could be the impact from it. And so we're really trying to hone in on stories that can make a difference. And so we're now working in Tanzania, in the Arctic in Finland, in Palau, Costa Rica, Austria. We've just finished one in Norway. One in India is in production. And in this way, we feel that we can bring to our student audience a much bigger breadth of environmental stories, and each one comes with an impact campaign. Each one, we think, will make a difference, and our body of work is now going to be growing at a much more rapid rate. And as mentors, we get to have a say and sort of a thumbprint on how the film turns out, and the length is what suits Schoolyard Films. I mean, we put that in too. So we're trying to create a win-win for these new filmmakers and for our audience. And the films are coming in Swahili, in Sami, which is an Inuit. I'm probably butchering this part, but a language from the very, very far north. We want them to make films in the language of where the story is happening. And anyway, so I'm really, really excited about that breadth of environmental stories that we're starting to get into our library that way.
I'm fascinated by the projects with K-12 schools and getting films in the hands of young people. And you triggered for me when you were just talking there some storytelling about how do we all come into this world with interest of this world. And I was thinking, as a classroom instructor, when I taught high school, I was very interested in my passion for the outdoors. My kids did not share that as much because they didn't have as much exposure to the outdoors, which brought me to research and thinking about ecological literacies and frameworks for helping young people to love and appreciate the beauty of nature, but also to do, as you say, bring stewardship forward. And I'm curious, I know what my research background and narrative is that brought me to this kind of framework. I'm curious, is there research in the work that you are doing? Are you influenced by academics such as Dr. Nazarian and I, who are writing about climate change? What influences have you followed to get you to where you are now with some of your thinking?
That's a great question. For me, one project has always led to the other, and with each project that we do, it brings up another 10 or 100 questions to ask. And so it's been a bit, I'll confess, it's been a bit piecemeal. It hasn't been necessarily that well thought out on our parts from the very beginning, but I do think that we're getting closer and closer to really making a difference in the world as we hone our skills in insisting that the films that we do and that we support have some answers as a part of them. And so in the days past, we made some really beautiful wildlife films, but they didn't really ask any hard questions, and maybe they didn't need to. They were certainly successful films there, but I think that we can do better now. And honestly, I think that the world needs storytellers to do better now, to put the information in a digestible way for them to consume, because they're the ones making the difference. We're providing the educational material, hopefully in an engaging way, but it's up to the world to decide, are these things worth making behavioral changes, for? Do we want to push and make a lot of noise? And how do we create policy change? And so we're doing our best to give the information, and then hopefully collectively we can do better with it.
And to that point, the Center for Climate, Coastal, and Marine Studies at Fairfield is Fairfield's first university-wide interdisciplinary research center supporting faculty and student research from across the campus, across the academic division. And so a lot of the work that we're doing is interdisciplinary. It is impactful research that not only is answering very important questions, but also teaching students the skills to answer those questions. And so our work as a center is very much as a team and collaborative. And so thinking back to your projects, the teams that you have of researchers, of scientists, of those that go out to do preparatory work in the field, the editors that are working to piece together that story, as you mentioned. Can you talk through that collaborative process, how that's done, the research that goes into it, and what that process is like, mirroring the team-related research that we're doing at the university?
Sure. I will say that at the start of my career as a new young filmmaker, I tried to wear all the hats. So I was shooting, I was editing, I was script writing, I was producing, and I thought this is the way for me to really grow. And I finally found a mentor who was just great with my camera work, and he pointed out this. He said, look, it is such a filmmaking is such a collaborative effort. He said, if you try to do it all, and if you're smart and talented, well, you can get your films to a certain level. But if, on the other hand, you choose the part of the process that you love the most, that you want to get the best at, devote your time and really, really perfect your skills there, do that, then team up with all the other people in that collaboration who have also said, I'm going to focus on my passion and I'm going to focus on this passion, and the quality of the end film is brought up so much higher than if one person tries to do it all. So for me, that was such an important lesson to learn. And so I took that to heart and I went about learning to be the best cameraman that I can be to bring back the best images. That's my contribution. I'm sometimes even embarrassed to tell you, do I even understand fully all of the science that's in our films? Not always. That's somebody else's department, but it takes all of us to bring the level up. And so, can I edit a film? Yeah. Am I an editor? No. And a real, true editor has a passion and a gift for taking all that material and, all those puzzle pieces and putting them together and pacing them and putting in the right sound effects and music and natural sound and all this stuff. And so it absolutely takes a team of people. Make sure that in your team, everybody has a passion for all those different elements.
The community part of what you just discussed is highly interesting to me as a researcher, and I'm thinking of accompaniment here at a Jesuit university of who we are together as a collective. And I want to bring this back underwater. I want to think for a second about the power of having a podcast like this and how inspiring it is for all of us to hear your wisdom. And I'm curious about, of all the shoots that you've done underwater, what has been the most breathtaking or the most mesmerizing or the most like you were just in absolute awe as you were filming it?
Do you know what? That one is an easy one, and it's sort of interesting. I think the year before last, it was quite recent, I was working for PBS on their long-standing nature program called Nature. And we were doing some work in the Florida Springs. And I don't know if you or your audience knows the Florida Springs, but they're just spectacular freshwater environments. And so we were in one area, and adjacent to us, there was a spring that had been cordoned off, and nobody was given access to it, and they were going to keep it that way for a couple of years. And they managed to get permission for two of us to, gently swim in. And I was so blown away by the spectacular lushness and beauty of that environment. And I'm friends with the director of the Florida Springs Institute. And I saw him just a few weeks later at I forget what the event was. And I mentioned to him that I got into this spring, and I told him just what I saw. And I was just so thrilled to see it. And he had this ear-to-ear grin on his face. And he said, "This is living proof that when we ease up on the pressure we put on nature, nature bounces back." And this was just a 2-year thing that they had going there. But their idea was to give different springs, a break here and then open it up. This one takes a break now. And it was really heartening to see exactly that, to see nature bouncing right back when we ease up on the human pressure that we put on many, many things. So that was wonderful to see.
That's fantastic. And from that story and from the other work that you've done, it's certainly an impressive body of work where you've been in some of the most extreme environments, some of the most beautiful environments to work on your films and your stories. Are there any ecosystems or species that you're still dreaming of capturing on film? So is there some environment that you haven't filmed in yet, but you're looking to film in or you'd be excited to film in?
I have been lucky to have gone around a lot of the world. In years past, I did some work in submarines, but not enough. That's an area that I would love to go back and do more in. They're incredibly interesting. They're far and few between, those kinds of jobs. They're incredibly uncomfortable. You go down in these very, very, very small vehicles, and you are typically, 3 people in this tiny area. The hatch closes, and let's say at 8 a.m., it's not going to open until 5 p.m., and you descend, a few thousand feet. You're so tightly packed in that when one person shifts a leg or an arm to get a little bit, more comfortable, well, the other 2 people have to shift also because you are that tightly packed together. But the opportunities to see things that I don't normally see, that most people don't normally see, is just so exciting. And so I would love to do more of the deep sea work in submarines.
That's really exciting. And we know that the ocean is so deep, so there is so much to film and so many stories to tell. You've commented on resiliency, both in terms of resiliency of the ocean, of the Florida Springs bouncing back. You've commented on the resiliency of filmmakers in that environment. Through all of your years of experience, what lessons in resiliency have you learned, both as a filmmaker and in getting to chronicle and film our natural world?
That's a hard question, Rob. I think that some of the assignments that I've had, you do your best to make them successful, but there absolutely are some that just don't work out. And you can come home truly after a 3-week expensive time in the field with nothing. And hopefully, if people have faith in you, they don't just stop giving you work, but we all rethink, okay, what didn't go right? What can we do better? And so sometimes you get a second chance at that. And so I think to have that kind of, is that resiliency, maybe determination to keep going, to figure it out when it's worth it. And maybe I won't give you the details now, but this afternoon when I talk to your students, I have a sequence up in the very, very far north where I had a complete and utter failure for a month. I thought the BBC would never call me up again. And lo and behold, a year later, for a different series, they gave me the same assignment, but we approached it in a very different way, and we had a phenomenally successful shoot. So maybe that kind of determination can help.
Yeah, I'm just mesmerized by this conversation, and I'm being inspired to think about what projects I might want to do next as a result of talking to you. And so that leads me to the question for all of us: what do you hope to work on next, or what projects do you have in the hopper right now, and where do you see your vision going in the next few years?
Well, we, over the last, sort of during the COVID years, we tackled our first ever series. We've always done one-off stories, and we tackled ocean plastic. And we thought we would just make one ocean plastic film, but as we kind of got into it deeper, we realized there was just more and more to do with that story. And so we then turned it into a 3-part series. Now it's become a 4-part series, and there are little sort of spin-offs as well. And so I've kind of seen the light that a series can be really good to get into things in more detail. And I mean, I would like to find out more from you all, because we are now researching a series on climate change. And so as we grow our mentorship work, on one hand, we will tackle probably a 3-part series on climate change.
That's exciting. And I think back to a quote from Dr. Sylvia Earle, who is a giant in the field of ocean research. When asked what her favorite dive was, her answer was, "My next dive." So always excitement about future projects. And we're happy to follow your upcoming series, Tom, on climate change. We're looking forward to it.
Can I add one thing right there? My last, I guess, 2 and 3 shoots ago were on a film with Sylvia, and she just turned 90 years old, and she seems to me genuinely as excited about diving as one would be at 20 years old. And she's been diving for a lot of decades, and she is just so much fun and so bright. And anyway, it was a joy to work with, in my mind, a real legend in ocean conservation and marine exploration. And what a wonderful, wonderful lady.
Absolutely. And what an ambassador for the ocean.
Yeah.
In closing, and in keeping with our theme as an interdisciplinary research center, my question to you is one for our students. What advice would you give them about blending art and science in a way that is impactful?
I think that is such a great question, because it is that combination, I think, that makes it impactful. You really need the combination. You need artful storytelling based on important scientific things to make the whole package engaging, because you can't make something that people aren't going to want to watch. So your challenge is, okay, how do I tell this story in a way that is interesting? And I do believe that it's that artful side coming together with science that can do exactly that. And so, I mean, every story is different, every approach to it, but if you can think about science scientifically, and maybe that's dogmatically in some respects, but think about that story artistically. It is that combination to bring them together which translates, I think, sometimes difficult topics in ways to a broader audience that can make a difference.
What a fitting way to end today's podcast. Our sincerest thanks to Tom for sharing his craft, as well as the passion and research that drive his work. From the technical challenges of filming beneath the surface to the groundbreaking stories he's telling of our oceans, today's conversation reminds us of the power of creativity and curiosity. We hope this discussion has encouraged you to look more closely at the world around you and to discover your own research passions. That's all for today's dive on the Coastal Call, but we'll surface again next month with another exciting conversation.